Hello and welcome to The Real Beef. I'm Don Keith. Well, I have a fantastic guest with me today, former four-term member of Parliament for Northwest Leicestershire, Andrew Bridgen. Mr. Bridgen exposed the Post Office Horizon scandal where the post office wrongly prosecuted hundreds of employees for theft and fraud, even imprisoning some, when it turns out that it was actually their faulty accounting software causing monetary discrepancies, not theft. Andrew also exposed the labor abuses in the fast fashion industry of Leicestershire, where companies doing work for online retailers were paying migrants illegal wages as low as £3 per hour in some instances. Then there's the H2S scam he exposed, and he is one of the only members of Parliament to speak out against the COVID-19 gene therapies in 2022, leading to his very famous expulsion from the Conservative Party. He now speaks about corruption in government to audiences around the country, and we're very happy to have him here to speak with us. With that, I'm going to bring him on. Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm good this evening. Thank you, Don.
Well, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a long time coming. I know you and I have been sort of back and forth on when you could come on because our schedules were conflicted. I know you're a very busy man, so I really appreciate you being here.
It's a pleasure.
You know, as I stated in my open, we talked about your famous expulsion from the Conservative Party over the vaccines. Now we're starting to see a lot more about vaccines in the media, but it's sort of going the opposite way now. And I wonder, how vindicated do you feel when you see someone like Robert F. Kennedy, our HHS secretary, who's removing the COVID vaccine from the recommended vaccine schedule for schools, and President Trump demanding reports from all the pharmaceutical companies on injury data and things like that? How does that make you feel now?
Well, RFK Jr., I go back a bit further. When I was expelled from the Conservative Party after 12 years in Parliament, and a lot longer than that in the party, not one of my friends in Parliament who I'd worked with for 12 years even texted me. But I did get a phone call from a presidential candidate on my mobile within an hour, and it was Robert Kennedy Jr., and he said that
Wow.
that it was a disgrace. So I've spoken with Bobby Kennedy in the past and Zoomed with him. I've spoken with Jay Bhattacharya before he got the job at the NIH, and I really support what they're trying to do to make America healthy again. And we've got exactly the same problems here in the UK as we have across basically the Anglosphere and the so-called developed world, unfortunately.
Now, I mean, it's fascinating to me that members of Parliament, were you the only member of Parliament speaker, or were there any others at all who were speaking out about the jabs?
There were one or two raising concerns, but they just got warned off. I mean, I was forced to speak out in late 2022 because our health regulator, the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, which would be probably the equivalent of the CDC, they were pushing for the government to authorize the COVID vaccines for babies down to 6 months, which is something that happened most of the rest of the world. I'd already seen the Fryman papers, the analysis of the original Moderna and Pfizer tests, trials, the papers that they tried to hide for 75 years, which thankfully the American Supreme Court forced them to release in 50,000 bundle lots over many months. And I saw that analysis, the Fryman papers suggesting at least 1 in 800 serious adverse events, including death. And there was no healthy infants of that or babies of that age group that had ever died of COVID. I went to colleagues. I knew there'd be a huge backlash from the establishment for going against the narrative. And I was shocked, Don. Colleagues said they agreed with me. Some of them admitted they were vaccine harmed themselves.
Really?
Yep. One of them actually said to me, I had 2 Pfizer jabs, Andrew. I went down to the gym, had terrible chest pains. Then I had to go to hospital, had an ECG, and they told me I'd had 2 heart attacks.
Two heart attacks?
And I'd be dead if I wasn't as healthy as I am. And
Oh
I
my
thought, well, that's it. He's going to speak. He's going to stand up with me. And he said, under no sir, I'm not going to speak out. Others came to me and said, one colleague came to me and said that her sister was paralyzed from the neck down after a Moderna booster.
Oh my
And I
Lord.
said, I'm really sorry to hear about that. That'd be Guillain-Barré syndrome. I'm really sorry to hear about that. But I mean, clearly you'll have to speak out. It's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
A duty. And she said that the problem was that her sister was a nurse, had been coerced into taking the booster. And now that she's paralyzed, she's at the mercy of our health service over here, the NHS. And she said, and you know what they're like with whistleblowers, so I daren't speak out. So I'm not speaking out. She never did speak out. Other colleagues came to me and told me they've got relatives who are vaccine harmed, but they were too scared to speak out. I don't know what they've got on them all. But I mean, they made such an example of me. It's worked, because half of the punishment they gave me, which was pretty harsh, cancelled in the media, accused of being a conspiracy theorist, major attacks on my finances and my character, and half of it was to punish me for daring to stand up in the chamber of the House of Commons and speak truth to power, and the other half was to scare the rest of the MPs, and it worked. So now, even though there's more evidence now than there was 3 years ago when I spoke out about the vaccine harms and excess deaths, and in fact a bit of stuff coming in the mainstream media over here. I mean, yesterday there was an article in the Daily Mail, which is the biggest online news as well, saying that the controversial study suggests there may be link between COVID vaccines and cancer.
Controversial.
It's the third. I think that's the 8.4 million participant survey in South Korea.
Wow.
They had a full survey in Italy, and of course the Japanese survey that came out that showed there was a link between the COVID boosters and surges in cancer at every booster. So yeah, controversial.
Wow.
I mean,
They won't be able to use that word for much longer, I don't think. There's just so much data coming out almost daily now. It seems like that's really refuting all of their previous claims. I think they're all going to be embarrassed.
Peter McCullough and his team are doing great work.
Fantastic.
They don't let the pressure off. I had the pleasure of meeting Peter on a couple of occasions. I think we spoke together at an event in Copenhagen a few years ago. So, well, they've silenced. We're supposed to speak in the mother of all parliaments without fear or favour. They tried to bribe me in January 2022. They tried to bribe me to shut up. So I mean, I was offered anything. The bribe was anything I wanted, which is quite a bribe.
Like money? They were offered you money to not speak?
We never got down to whatever it was. They just offered me, you just tell us what you want and we'll get it for you. And then you do what we want, you shut up. And I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, I'd never been approached like that. So I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, you just have to tell us what you want. And I said, well, anything I want. They said, well, pretty much, yeah. So I said, well, is that the game we're playing? And they said, yeah, that's the game we're always playing. So I said, if that's the game we're playing, the only thing I want is the Prime Minister's resignation letter. Apparently that was the one thing I couldn't have. So I said, no good, is it? I don't want anything else if that's the game we're playing.
Right. I can't believe, like, what about some of the more, like Nigel Farage? Did you come to him? Did you say anything to him?
When I'd exhausted all avenues in Parliament, I even went to the Labour Party. I even went to the Socialists and appealed to their better nature and said, well, you're the opposition. These are the facts. Oppose. And they said, we're not taking on Big Pharma. That's what they said.
Farage said that as well?
No, the Labour Party said that. Farage, I had an hour and a half with him in January 23. Him and Aaron Banks in a meeting in London. Gave him an hour and a half of all the science and talked about NG163 in the UK, which was a treatment for vulnerable elderly, which gave them midazolam and morphine as a treatment for COVID, which is a terrible respiratory suppressant, which is interesting that you would give someone you suspected having a respiratory virus, a respiratory suppressant.
That seems odd.
well, probably that euthanized about 35 or 40,000 vulnerable elderly in hospital. That created the first wave of COVID deaths to scare people into taking the vaccine. In America, it would have been remdesivir that was given. Yeah, run death is near.
Well, yeah,
What they call.
that'd be a good word for it, I think.
I gave him all this for an hour and a half, and at the end, he just looked me in the eye and said, "Andrew, I'm not talking about the vaccines, and if you know what's good for you, you won't either." He knew, and he wasn't.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Unreal.
There was a complete lack of moral fiber, I would have said.
It seems like, and he was sort of the it guy for truly conservative Brits. When after Brexit, he campaigned for Brexit for what 25 years or something.
I'm afraid he's not. I also, sometime after, I'd known Nigel for 10 years, and I spoke to him about the fact that both the Conservative and Labour Party were in favour of the UK joining the European Defence and Securities Union, which would give the EU control of our Army, Navy, Air Force, MI6, MI5, GCHQ, our nuclear deterrent, and our local police force. And it happened. I mean, Starmer signed us into the beginning of that months and months ago. But I mean, I told Nigel about it 2 years ago, and he said, "No, Brexit's done, Andrew. We're not talking about Brexit anymore." He's completely controlled.
Well, they already seem to the European Union already seems to control your immigration policy, even though you're supposed to be a sovereign nation. So I don't really understand.
It's amazing that they've been 14 years trying to get into power. They get into power. They want to give control of our military, intelligence services, and local police to the EU. They want to give tax powers away to the OECD, and they want to give our health policy away to the WHO. So they haven't got much left, quite honestly.
What does it take? What would it take to pull out of that ECHR?
It would take a debate and a vote. What we need to do is we need to protect. I mean, there was a time when I would have just said, "Yeah, let's just pull out of it." There's lots of countries aren't in it that you don't have a problem with. I mean, I would have said Canada's not in it at the time, and America's not in it, and Australia's not in it, and New Zealand's not in it. I don't feel, I mean, human rights are actually under attack across the globe at the moment. So what we actually need is a British Bill of Rights to replace it, so that people know what they've got.
I think the rights of the indigenous people across the West are what's really under attack more than anything. Right now,
well, I mean, I released, I mean, all this stuff, Don, about, we're going to smash. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a Conservative government or a Labour government, or whether it was a Reform government. I mean, they're all going to smash the gangs. Well, with all the resources of the state, the only gang they've actually smashed was a gang they discovered that was smuggling people from UK back to France who didn't like it. They smashed them. That tells you all you need to know. I mean, how long would it take to, recruit a few people to infiltrate and pretend to be migrants on the coast in France and find out who you have to pay the money to, where the boats are coming? I mean, the boats, you could analyze the boats and find out exactly where they were manufactured in 5 minutes. Go and trace them down, and all you've got to do is get the people who are buying the boats every week. But actually, what I found out is, and I posted a video of that, which someone has sent me, and the boats are going back to France to be reused. They're being shipped back across the tunnel, and they don't even bother deflating the boats. They put them on the lorry inflated because they're going to put them straight back into the water.
Is anyone reporting this other than folks on independent journalists on social media or anything like that? No mainstream media reporting on that kind of thing?
No. There's just so many things our mainstream media won't talk about. They wouldn't talk about the WHO treaties, the pandemic treaty. They won't talk about vaccine harms unless they have to.
Unreal.
And also, we're still being played by the net zero scam as well, which is ludicrous.
Yeah, everything green, right?
Well, they must think we're cabbage-like. I mean, have to be that green to swallow that. I mean, saying that carbon dioxide is poisonous. We've got to get rid of carbon dioxide, the gas of life.
Yeah.
There's no photosynthesis without carbon dioxide.
I do want to put your mind at ease today. I saw a post you had where you were. Someone had said that it was. I don't know if it went viral or not, but some lady was posting that Trump was making like $500 million off of this Pfizer deal. That's not the case. The Trump RX website is a government website. We have something called the emoluments clause in our Constitution's Article 2, Section 1, I believe, that says the president cannot be compensated for anything other than his presidential salary on any deal he makes, foreign or domestic.
It did worry me when he said that Albert Bourla and Pfizer had done a great job. I mean, depends what their job was. If their job was killing plenty of people with their vaccines, then they did a great job.
Yeah, you know what? I think here's my take on that. And Trump's a very diplomatic guy. You know, people always say, why does he always say Keir Starmer is a good guy? Well, Trump's just being diplomatic. Trump's not stupid. He knows exactly what's going on with Keir Starmer and what a communist, really, in my opinion, Keir Starmer is. But the way I see it is, it's so hard to sue Pfizer and Moderna and all these pharmacy companies. We have something called the what is this called the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act of 2005, and it basically gives liability immunity to all the pharmaceutical companies so that they can't be sued for things like vaccine. So if someone's vaccine injured, they aren't able to go and sue the pharmaceutical company. So in my opinion, what's going on here is this is Trump's way of making them pay, because he knows the courts can't do anything. 70 billion. Not only are they having to pay 70 billion, but they also have to now sell their drugs at what's called the most favored nations price, which is the lowest price of any drug we can find overseas. So they're going to lose tons of money from that, and the 70 billion that they're having to invest in America anyway.
Much money to bribe your senators and congressmen.
They're still going to have their lobbies, man, and it's tough. The lobbies are really the most dangerous thing in our country, I think. So many lobbies. Pharma's probably the biggest. We've got lots of huge lobbies that pay campaign donations. They bribe that way, and who knows what kind of under the table the money these people get? Because if you look at their stock market value evaluations, I mean, they go from $100,000 to you're worth 30 million in a couple of years of being in Congress. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think it's the same power they have in the UK. I mean, before I was expelled from the party, I had a meeting with a grandee, and I gave him the hour and a half, the same spiel I gave to Nigel Farage a week or so later. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that hour and a half, and I knew this person I was meeting with, I knew his sister had to go to hospital after 2 Pfizer jabs with chest pains. And so he knew. I didn't tell him that. And at the end of that hour and a half, I asked him if he was going to help me. And he turned around and said, Andrew, there is currently no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind that you'll be taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world, with all the personal risk for you that will entail should you continue. And then they put a story out saying I was going to commit suicide, which was...
Well, that's when you need to worry. When they start convincing people that you're trying to commit suicide.
I had to go on social media to say, I thank people
I'm
for
not
this
suicidal
about my well-being, but I hate to disappoint them. I'm not going to commit suicide.
No, man, it's crazy,
Mind games.
It makes you wonder what really happened to people like Epstein and all these other folks they say committed suicide who everybody says, well, no, he was not suicidal. So what happened to them, And you worry, well, do I need to get security?
I was told if you were hanging off a doorknob, that's a sign that you were going to blow the whistle or speak out. Or I don't
know. That makes a lot of sense to me. But you were at the, I spoke at the demonstration here a couple of weeks ago. I know you were one before that. You and I had also spoke. What did you think of that demonstration?
Oh, well, it's same as always. It's salt of the earth people. It's very hard to get a grip of how many people are there when you're on the ground, isn't it? Because you just see what you see. But
right.
Yeah, there was a lot more. I mean, a multiple. I mean, the minimum was 500,000. It could have been over 1 million.
I think 110,000 is way low, and I may have overestimated at times because it just looked so massive to me. But I thought it was closer to at least 1 million or more.
I think I shook hands with about 110,000 on the march.
Yeah, because they were everywhere. Everywhere you went, there was walls of people. But I was told that our team actually asked the police. The police estimate was around 3 million. Now that I look at it, that might seem a little extreme, but I think it was definitely over 1 million. But if you just look at those aerial photographs, it's unreal. I've never seen anything like it in London, at least. I don't think any in the world I've seen anything that massive.
That's right. And it was very well behaved as always. I didn't see
Very
any.
well.
I mean, amazingly well behaved.
Yeah, and the few incidents they had, they made sure to point out, because it was a, right wing, far
All right,
right,
all
right
right.
so far is what they were. But and then you look at Notting Hill, something like that, that's more full of leftists and over
Yeah,
like 500 arrests or something. They don't breathe a
yeah, they
word
haven't
about it.
been in it. Well, they had about 40 rapes, didn't they? So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you know,
it's terrible. We were talking about, I know we were just talking about Nigel Farage, but what do you think about the newer party, Advance UK and Ben Habib? What do you think about them personally? I don't think have you endorsed anyone yet?
no, and I know Ben for a few years. I'd hoped that Rupert Lowe was going to join the party, and he
Hmm.
has.
Which
Uh,
party?
Advance.
Okay.
I thought he was going to lead it, and he hasn't. And I spoke to Ben some months ago and asked him, what are your policies going to be on the vaccines? And he told me he didn't know anything about the vaccine. So I spoke to him again a few weeks ago and he said, well, are you going to join us? I said, well, can we have a meeting and talk about what the policy is going to be? And he said it was too early to talk about policies. So I said, well, it's too early for me to join you then.
No, I know he's announced some of his policies I've heard, but I haven't heard anything on vaccines. You're right about that. I'll have to ask him. I'm in touch with him privately, so I'll ask him about that. I've not asked him about his vaccine policy specifically, but I will ask him about that because I'd like to know too, quite honestly. But everything else he said, I really like. I've actually publicly endorsed him. I like everything he says, but I have not asked him about vaccines, so I'll have to do that.
But he's got some good people around him. Howard Cox is a good guy. I've known
I
Howard,
like Howard. I like Howard.
for 15 years. He's an
Hmm.
excellent campaigner.
Hmm.
Um, well, I know that reform and Nigel Farage is not the answer.
Okay.
And
Oh, I know that
to
100%.
be
I'm with
honest,
you
the
there.
mere fact that people like me are cancelled, apparently Ben Habib's cancelled now. The fact that the mainstream media, who won't talk about all these things that the public need to know about, are describing Nigel Farage as the next prime minister, that tells you straight away that he's actually in the club.
Hmm.
He's the approved candidate, and we all know what that means.
Hmm. Yeah. You know, what was I going to say about something about Ben? Oh, did you see their launch party, the Advance UK launch party?
I heard it was that they pulled the venue on him at the last moment.
They tried to pull the venue at the last moment. It seems like the government, the establishment would do whatever it takes. If you're
Well,
anywhere
that's a
right
good
of
sign.
center.
That's a good sign. Anybody who the establishment are giving a hard time to can't be all bad.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, but I'm with you on Farage. I don't want to sit here and beat a dead horse, but it's just like when you listen to him on immigration and he says, no, I don't want to get caught up in mass deportations. It's an impossibility. And then they ask him about, men and women's spaces, trans, and he says, well, I've never, they ask him, would you support something along the lines of would you support trans women, meaning biological males, in female prison? And he says, well, I've never served in a prison or worked in a prison, so I can't answer that. Like, really?
You can't, well, yeah, that doesn't sound the answer of a future prime minister. I'll be honest, I don't think Nigel will be a prime minister. I think either he's got quite a bit of baggage and something's going to come out,
Hmm.
or I've got this sneaky feeling that he was forced to come back into politics because the establishment knew that Richard Tice wouldn't take enough votes off the Tories to give Starmer the majority that he's got with such small support.
Hmm.
And I think Nigel has no appetite to be prime minister and that scrutiny.
What do you think
Uh,
happened to him? He seemed to have just like flipped a switch and he's just not the same guy he was in 2016. What happened, do you think?
I think the establishment got him, and I think he's probably compromised like the rest of our politicians are, except perhaps Rupert Lowe, who's probably finding it very lonely in Parliament, I should imagine.
Yeah.
And I think that if Reform won, I'll make a little prediction that Nigel Farage will say he's got health problems very quickly, and you'll end up with Mohammed Zia Youssef.
Zia Yusuf.
Yep. He'll come out of the shadows. Goodness knows where he came from. A man who bought his way into the top of that party with £200,000.
I've heard that story. I've heard that story.
How does that work?
Yeah.
Um,
As I understand it, Rupert Lowe was asked to be head of Advance, but he didn't want it. Ben didn't want it. Just from what I understand, Ben didn't want to be the leader of the party at first, and then Rupert was not joining yet. I think the jury's still out whether or not he will or he won't. I haven't heard him say definitively that he won't. I've been in contact with him online as well, but he has not publicly declared whether he will or he won't. So
You've got to
I
remember
guess,
that Rupert will be 72 at the next election,
uh-huh.
and I think I've known Rupert before he was an MP, and I was an MP,
Mhm.
and I told him how corrupt it all was, and I don't think he believed me, but I mean, I think he believes me now. I
Yeah.
think he's seen firsthand how corrupt it all is. And to be honest, if you're a decent person, I mean, it's a fairly lonely place in Parliament.
Yeah, I think people just don't realize the same was with Trump. Trump has always talked about how corrupt it was, but even he said, well, "I didn't realize exactly how corrupt until
How
I became
corrupt it
president."
was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
The problem is, Don, and I've said this many times, and I stand by it, that not all the apples in our institutional barrels are rotten, but
mhm,
all the apples at the top of all the barrels are rotten. And any apple that wants to rise to the top of the barrel has got to rot, or they won't let you rise. And so we've got to take the top off all of our institutional barrels. That's politics, that's the civil service, that's the
mhm,
police, the judiciary, and big corporations. If we could make the changes we need, it's pretty quick, and there would be
mhm.
great opportunities for people who weren't corrupt. And the problem with once institutions or organizations become corrupt, I mean, once you're the titular head of a corrupt organization, and when you come to retire or move on to another job, you've got to make sure that the person who takes your job is at least as corrupt as you were, otherwise it's going to come out, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's why it's self-perpetuating, and it's been going on for a long time. And of course, I should have included the media institution into all that as well, um, the mainstream media.
It's so dangerous. They're so dangerous. They're probably the most dangerous thing in our society, I would say.
I always use the Malcolm X quote, which I particularly like. He said that the media have the most power in the world because they have the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent, and
So
they do.
true. So true. And he was sort of a revolutionary in his own right. I certainly don't agree with all of his
No,
methods and his means,
he
but he
was
was
certainly
right
right
about a lot of
about that
stuff.
one.
Yeah, he was right about a lot of stuff.
Well, that's what Trump always called them, the fake news, and I don't think people got it to start with, but I mean, he's
Hmm.
been doing it for a very long time, and
A long time.
the
Long time.
biggest, actually, one of the biggest powers our mainstream medias have is they have the power to decide what's the news and what's not the news, and what they report and what they don't report. And that's
Hmm.
massive power.
Right. It is. It really is. If I could, I want to move on to talk about something that's been in the news a lot lately in the UK, and that's digital IDs. When we look around the world and we see other countries that use digital IDs, they're used to surveil and track citizens, who you're associated with. It can exclude you from like essential services, welfare, education, things like that. It causes data breaches, identity theft, all these other problems. It's really forced compliance, is what it is, and it just totally removes any autonomy you have as a citizen, forced to comply with the government because they can track your every move. How is it that it's being so seriously considered in a country like the UK, who is really one of the staples, supposedly, of freedom in Western society? Obviously, not now. It's not the Great Britain that it used to be, but it's still supposedly a free country. How's this happening in Great Britain?
But you'll notice that when President Trump challenges Starmer about free speech, Starmer's stock answer is, "We have a great history of free speech." Well, we did have a great history, but we don't have it anymore. I mean, he's not lying to Trump, is he, when he says we had a history?
Mm-hmm.
Well, too many people have woken up in the UK and around the world, certainly in the UK now, about so many issues, whether it's net zero, whether it's the vaccines, whether it's the corruption in the government, the police, the judiciary, the two-tier policing. And the government need now to have a big crackdown. And if they can get digital ID through, and intimidate people, then they stay in control. And if they don't, they lose control. And now that's what they want to do. And I tell anybody, if you say yes to digital ID, the problem is you'll never be able to say no to the government again, because they will have that power over you.
That's exactly right.
And also, once the whole world's on its You know, do you know that Carney was over from Canada on the day that Keir Starmer announced the digital ID policy, and then now they've announced that they're going to do it in Canada as well. It's been announced they're doing it in Australia, and it'll be in New Zealand in no time at all, no doubt. And the world's in lockstep again because the same thing's happening around the world.
Yeah, it won't be long till they try it here. I don't think it could ever happen under a Trump or Vance administration, but if we ever get a leftist government and again, leftist party rule, they'll try it here too. They're going to go with what the rest of the West is doing. That's why it's so dangerous. But to me, one of they're trying to bring it in under the auspices of separating your citizens from immigrants, and so we're sort of tamping down on immigration. But the problem, as I see it, and from what I've researched about your country, is the illegal immigrants are paid by cash anyway. So how are they going to how are the citizens really going to benefit if to me it seems like a guise to entrap everyone because the people who have work visas will also qualify for a digital ID, and we all know that eventually these people who are coming over here illegally will get the work visas too. So it's really just a way to force compliance upon all of the citizens. I see it.
It's a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse. So yeah, I mean, I think somebody produced a cartoon which said it all. That the illegal migrants coming over on the dinghies from France, landing on the beach, and a policeman says, "Have you got a digital ID?" And they say, "No, we haven't. We'll go back to France then." And it's just not going to happen, is it? So it's just an excuse. No, it's there's going to be the economic crash is coming yet. They've got to get the digital ID in around the world before the economic crash. Then when they bring the CBDC, central bank digital currency, and link it to our digital ID, then they've got the basis of the social credit score.
Social credit score.
Which they've already got in China, and then they've got absolute control over us. But I mean, even accepting the digital ID, and in the UK, normally, quite often, they're letting prisoners out now at 40% tariff. So if they got 10 years, they're doing 4 years in prison with good behavior. Then they're on license, normally with a tag. Well, I mean, the tag, they have to come in the house and show a curfew that they're in the house and where they are, but not the rest of the time. Well, we'll have more surveillance on a normal citizen than someone who's on license having committed a serious crime.
No,
my point is that if we give this freedom away, we're giving the freedom away of future generations of our nation who aren't even born yet, and they'll never know the freedom they lost, and we've given it away, and it's not ours to give their freedom away, because the state never gives you any freedom back, and they'll always tell you it's for your convenience and safety. And anyone who's willing to give up their freedom for convenience and safety, it's the only person it's going to be convenient for is the government. They're going to get lots of data on you, and you'll end up with neither safety or freedom, unfortunately.
Well, I think it was one of our founding. I think it was Ben Franklin who said, "He who's willing to give up a little freedom for a little safety deserves neither freedom nor safety."
Absolutely right.
And I think what you're saying goes right along with that. So yeah, I agree with you there. Speaking of surveillance, my friend Tommy Robinson, he's a mutual friend of ours. You talked about surveillance. He actually has to go to court and possibly faces more prison time in a couple of weeks because as a journalist, and I don't think anyone can deny Tommy Robinson's a journalist now. I mean, he just stood on a stage and interviewed Elon Musk for 20 minutes in front of that million people we just talked about. But as a journalist,
and 3 million online, wasn't there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Two or 3 million online. That's right. But he was. They stopped him coming across one of the borders there. I think it was the cliffs. Where's the cliffs of Dover? What town is that? I can't remember right off the top of my head. Yeah. Okay. They stopped him coming in through the tunnels there. Arrested him, took his phone, and demanded he give his security password. He refused because you're supposed to have freedom of press in Britain. And if you're a journalist like Tommy, imagine the sources Tommy has in his phone that could potentially be endangered if they get access to that phone, especially being that the justice system, the police, office, police departments are heavily inundated with Muslims. And you've got all these potential young girls maybe who were sources for Tommy Robinson. Well, then you give up those passwords and you've endangered all of your sources. But now they want to throw him in prison potentially for them.
They would have had all my text messages to him as well. Thank you.
And mine.
I mean, he was hammered for not handing over his codes.
Yeah. And so what do you think about how's that even possible? I mean, which doesn't a judge who looks at this case have to sort of weigh which is more important? Is it our freedom of press, freedom of speech, or getting this journalist's passwords to his phone just because he's Tommy Robbins?
Well, Don, I mean, 5 years ago, I didn't know anyone who'd been to prison or was in prison. Now I've got lots of friends who are in prison.
Yeah. Yeah, they actually make pretty good friends, don't they?
My friends and myself, we haven't changed. Something's changed. Even in Germany, I'm hoping to go in the next few weeks to go and visit the German lawyer, who's a friend of mine, Rainer Fulmick. He's been in solitary confinement for over 2 years. What was
his charge or offense, I should say?
Well, he was the legal firm that you remember the BMW emissions scam where they were pretending the cars were more green than they were.
Mm-hmm.
His legal firm uncovered that, and he's a smart guy, and he said the vaccines are hurting people, that they're not safe, not effective, years ago. And then he moved to Mexico for safety, but he had to renew his passport, and him and his wife went to the German consulate in Mexico, and they grabbed him, separated him from his wife, put him on a plane, and sent him back to Germany. And they've established some fraud charges against him, which are extremely spurious, and it's just to shut him up, and he's in solitary confinement for months and months and months. And so I don't want people to forget about him either. So I'm going to go to Hamburg and then get the train down to see him.
Yeah, Germany's sort of reverting to their pre-World War II era, aren't they?
Well, even the candidates for the AfD, that cluster of deaths of independent and AfD candidates.
How is that even possible?
It was about 11 in the end, and statistically, it wasn't possible.
Impossible. And how many of them are? It's like, is it health issues? Some of them suicides and heart attacks and stuff like that. Just
all sorts of things.
Probably just sneaking up behind them and giving them a COVID jab. Just wait for them to fall.
You talk about, we go back to the COVID jabs. I mean, Pfizer did not declare to the regulators that they'd put the simian virus 40 promoter region into their the genetic code of their spike protein, and I mean, that's fraud, and surely fraud undermines any immunity from prosecution. I mean, fraud normally invalidates everything.
Willful negligence is the only way you can go. Is it willful misconduct? I think is actually how the act actually says that you can sue them if there is willful misconduct shown. So hopefully we will be able to see that, and we can still go after them. The cherry on top would be that Trump makes them pay this $70 billion. They have to reduce all their pharma costs, and they are able to be sued by the American people. And they're probably the biggest class action lawsuit of all time is what it would be.
Well, as an American, you might not. Unfortunately, you were spared it. But we had a drug that was released in the late 50s called thalidomide. It was made by a German company.
I've heard of it. Yep.
Hemigrunethal. Turned out it was crossing the blood placenta barrier. It was preventing angiogenesis, which is the creation of blood vessels. Its selling point was you could not overdose on it, so the mothers could have as much as they wanted to stop. And it turned out it was badly preventing the arms and legs growing, or angiogenesis, preventing the blood vessels growing. 80% of the babies died, and 20% were born with terrible disabilities. Depending on the amount that the mother had taken and the time of gestation when she took it.
Mm-hmm. What was its use supposed to be for?
It was anti-nausea.
Anti-nausea.
So they actually, doctors then prescribed it for morning sickness. Mm-hmm. And the marketing slogan of thalidomide was safe and effective.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was decided, well, it was ruled that no pharmaceutical company could claim that their products were safe and effective without caveats. But of course, when it came to the COVID jabs, it wasn't the pharma companies that were saying it. It was the politicians and the civil servants and the doctors were saying it's safe and effective, because big pharma would never get away with that. And what we do know in the UK is that the thalidomide was withdrawn in 1961 from the market. It was 1972 before there was a debate in the House of Commons and any compensation was. They covered it up for 11 years. And the company made thalidomide, chemigrunethal. They'd got an injunction on UK newspapers who couldn't write stories about the link between the thalidomide and the birth defects. That was turned over in a Strasbourg court, I think, and 3 judges ruled that successive speakers of the House of Commons had deliberately suppressed all questions and debate on thalidomide for 11 years. So it's all happened before. No wonder they think they're going to get 20 years on the jabs.
Yeah, it's all about money too. I mean, if you look, one of the things I always tell people, if you look at who owns the pharmaceutical companies, it's the same people who own the media. If you look at like companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street Global Advisors, they own 80% of all of the companies on the stock. Well, 80% shares of all the companies on the stock market. So if you own, and they all have ownership, majority ownership of ABC, Fox, NBC, MSNBC, CNN. If you have a burger restaurant and a newspaper and you don't rave about how great your burger restaurant is in your newspaper, you're sort of an idiot. So if you own all of these pharmaceutical companies and you own all of the media, aren't you a bit of an idiot if you don't rave about your pharmaceutical, your vaccines, and your other medications on the media? And you certainly aren't going to reveal any information that denigrates any of your other properties, right? So it's all just a big money grab in the end, I believe. So we'll see.
It's a big cartel. We're supposed to have the group of, I don't know what they call them on Capitol Hill, but in Parliament, they're supposed to have the best journalists from all the outlets are there. They all love to be the political correspondent for the BBC or ITV or the Times or whatever. And they're called the lobby. Well, I mean, I realized when I exposed the post office, or tried to expose the post office scandal 12, 14 years ago, I went to all those journalists, I got all the evidence, and I said, look, run this story. All this 1,000 sub-postmasters are innocent. It's all a miscarriage of justice, the biggest one in the country's history. Here's all the evidence. You run this story and you'll get an award. And none of them could run the story. It came out 10 years later. They covered it up. They just couldn't run it. And then it was the same journalists I went to go and see in many cases about the vaccine harms and the excess deaths in 2022. And they couldn't run the story. We don't have a free press in the UK.
It's one big incestuous relationship, which brings me to something. I keep hearing about different members of Parliament and the rent boys, which I guess are young male prostitutes. Do you know what I'm talking about? Of course, you know what I'm talking about. Do you hear that stuff?
Yeah. One of my arch enemies in Parliament was a man called Keith Vaz, a Labour MP for Leicester East, down the road from northwest Leicestershire, probably about 20 miles away, 15, 16 miles away. And I managed to get him out. That was the cocaine and rent boy scandal that did for him in 2016.
Right. And there was some stuff about Keir Starmer too.
Keir Starmer. Boys, right? Yeah. He wants to control us with digital ID. He can't even control the Ukrainian rent boys. He had 3 arson attacks on his. I mean, I served for 14 years. I never had a rent boy ever set fire to any of my property. And he had 3. He had 3 at the same time. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Because you're not hanging out with them. What about a guy? What about a guy? There's a guy named who was
I was accused once that somebody put some graffiti in one of the MPs, male MPs' cubicles, and they asked me, and they said, "Have you done that?" I said, "No." I said, "Unlike many of my colleagues, I didn't come to Parliament to hang around the gents' toilets."
Well, good for you. Oh my my God, who would do that? I mean, I guess the Labor Party for
Somebody,
sure.
somebody does.
And speaking of the labor, there was one of your labor MPs got suspended recently. He was very high ranking, and let's just say his name rhymes with Hicktown, but he was suspended. And I got someone reported to me, and this may be kind of explosive because nobody's talking about it. It was reported to me by this guy that this suspended member of Parliament was engaged with a relationship with one of these rent boys who was younger than 16, so he was underage. But it was such a brutal engagement
Yes,
and
yes.
so violent that
He,
this
he,
kid's got to wear a colostomy bag for the rest of his life. Did you hear that?
yes, unfortunately, I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the worst part of it to me is now I'm finding out there's potentially either a super injunction or a gag order on either members of parliament or the media for nobody to talk about it. So basically, this guy's being protected in these heinous acts against this young boy,
Well,
underage child, being protected by all of these
to be
people by
honest,
this super injunction.
I think it's worse than that. My own experience was that a lady who worked in Parliament for a Labour MP was being sexually assaulted by him, and she confided in me, and I tried to help her and tried to get her some support, and I couldn't. But in the end, she took him to an employment tribunal, and I said I'd give evidence against him. And being a good Conservative MP at the time, I wrote to Number 10 and said, get ready for the by-election in Hartlepool because this guy's going down. I'm going to give evidence against him, and he'll have to go. And I got a message back from the Conservative Party saying, do not give evidence for the victim, stay out of it. And I thought,
Unreal.
what? Unreal. And I said, I'm not. I said, I've given my word. I'm going to give evidence. I'm going to give evidence. And he went down, and we did win the by-election. But I came to realise what it was. It's a sort of unwritten rule that we don't expose their sexual deviance, and they don't expose, and that's how bad it is. And of course, once I broke the truce, then they were coming out of the woodwork, left, right, and centre, because they're all being exposed by each side. A tit for tat attack all the time.
So do you know if there's an actual official court order to not discuss this guy's case that I'm talking about, or is it just sort of a?
I think there's an absolute ruck of super injunctions around the Labour Party in their run up to the election. I think there's a lot around Starmer's private life, which I know.
How do these super injunctions remain secretive like that? Why aren't they public knowledge? It seems like you could have like a public record.
They love it when they affect children, because then they say it's about children and you can't talk about children. Yeah,
right.
They use that as an excuse.
Speaking of children's grooming gangs have been in the news quite a bit in the UK, especially since it was retweeted by Elon Musk, and Elon Musk exposed it to the world. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of information here that not anyone's privy to, so I have to toot my own horn for a minute. It was actually me who posted the post that Elon saw that brought attention to Elon, because he actually responded to me and was like, "What?" with a big question mark and an exclamation point, and then he started just going off and posting about it. But I thought that was cool. That's actually the first time he ever responded to one of my posts. But with all that information about the grooming gangs, and now since all this has happened, I've made so many trips to the UK, and I've spoken with so many people and victims. It's really horrendous how it happens, and how the police will actually come to the houses where these young girls are being groomed, and then rather than arrest the perpetrators, they'll sometimes arrest the girl, or they'll arrest the parents for coming to rescue the girl. I mean, how is it possible? What are the citizens supposed to do, and what will they do, you think, eventually?
Well, the police have been complicit in covering it up, but we've also got in South Yorkshire, where it's been pretty rife. They're not even doing an investigation, their own investigation now into what went wrong, because it turns out that so many of the victims won't give evidence to South Yorkshire Police, because they were actually raped by the policemen as well during the investigation. They were threatened, either have sex with the police or we'll hand you back to the gangs. And so now they've had to move their own. They were having an internal investigation of how they'd handled the Muslim rape gangs, and now they've had to hand it over to the National Crime Agency because none of the victims will come forward to South Yorkshire Police.
Wasn't it? I'm sorry, go ahead.
How is the Chief Constable still in a job?
Yeah, these people are just so protected. I believe it wasn't it Jess Phillips who stood in the middle of Parliament and said she'd known for years that the policemen were involved in these, and she did absolutely nothing.
Yep, and she was supposed to be the shadow minister for women and girls and equality. Yes,
Right, right. I mean, it just baffles me how it can be this corrupt, and how this is the kind of thing that starts revolutions, man.
It baffles me that when I explained to everyone in Parliament that the vaccines were killing people, there was no one willing to stand with me to protect perfectly healthy children from being harmed by the vaccines. There was nobody, and they knew, and lots of them knew, but they wouldn't stand up. Why?
What's happening in your country to deal with some of these pharmaceutical companies and get the real data behind the vaccine injuries and things like that? Is anyone in your government doing anything? Is there any litigation or I guess acts of Parliament?
We're very much relying on the Americans to see a tsunami of truth and justice coming across the Atlantic and sweeping away. I mean, we've just got absolute lightweights of self-serving politicians across the UK and Europe, but I'm not even sure that. I mean, the way they're reporting what goes on in America, they're just going to paint Bobby Kennedy as some sort of anti-vaxxer. I mean, they called me an anti-vaxxer, and I'd had two, and the second one had hurt me. I mean,
you got the vaccine?
I had 2 AstraZeneca, and the second one hurt me.
Really?
Yeah.
What type? Anything you can talk about? Or you mind talking about?
Yeah. I didn't feel very well. They said to me, I had the first one, no problem at all. And they said, oh, if you had the first one and no reaction, it'll be even better with the second one. I had the second one, felt terrible, terrible chest pains up here and shoulder pains. I went to the hospital to get checked out. And then I thought, I've got a cold in July. And I thought, what's going on? And then I realized after a month, I got hay fever. It's autoimmune problems. I got hay fever at 57. I've never had hay fever in my life. I didn't know what it was. And then when that went, I came out in hives all over my body for 7 months. I had like nettle rash all over my body, and I was having to take antihistamines every 8 hours. And if I didn't take one before I went to bed, and as soon as I woke up in the morning, they just burst out all over my body, and I just felt terrible.
How long did it take that to go away? Or are you still having issues at all?
I'm taking a lot of medication to try and improve my immune system. And all I'll say is that every year that goes by that I haven't had a jab, it's less. The symptoms are a lot less. So that's positive. I mean, that's how I know when I stand up in Parliament and say these vaccines have damaged people's immune system, and anything that damages your immune system means you're more prone to cancer. Oh, I'll tell you one thing. In February 2023, after I'd stopped the government on my own from jabbing the babies, which they never, although they said it was all rubbish, I'd said, they never dared authorize that in the UK. I think it was us and Denmark didn't do it. And that was why. A cabinet minister who I thought was a friend of mine came to me in Parliament, and bear in mind, they weren't talking to me after that. I did 20 months where they ostracized me and wouldn't talk to me, sit near me. I had to eat all my meals on my own for 20 months in Parliament after that. And he came to me and he whispered in my ear, you can speak out, Andrew, about the vaccines all you want to. You're vaccinated. That means you'll be dead of cancer soon. He laughed and walked off. That was in February 2023. That's what he said to me.
Unbelievable. That must have scared you to death, man.
I was shocked. I wasn't scared. I was shocked. I mean, to be honest, if I hadn't been as shocked as I'd probably punched him in the mouth. I mean, what sort of person would ever say that to anybody? You know?
Oh man, that's funny. That's funny. Well, I'm glad you didn't, because they'd probably just strung you up or threw you in jail, like they do everybody else.
I do notice that the security guards are getting up, the armed guards around Parliament, more and more of them. And I notice now that the fences are getting ever higher. That's not a good sign for democracy. And also, it appears now that MPs are walking around their constituencies with the uniformed policemen either side of them. this is not how democracy works in this country. I never had any bodyguards or needed any bodyguards or anything. It's crazy.
Well, I always tell people, our revolution against British tyranny started for a lot less than what you guys are going through now. The tyranny you're experiencing is far worse than what was imposed upon us. I mean, the Boston Tea Party was basically over a tea tax that we opposed, and just look at how much worse the taxes are now, and they're throwing you guys in jail for speaking out, speaking your opinions. Even I saw just today a preacher was arrested for speaking right out of the Bible. You're supposed to be able to speak about religion in your country. This guy was just preaching word for word right out of the Bible. They told him he couldn't do it anymore, and they were arresting him if he preaches anymore out of the Bible.
Well, you've got Christians being persecuted all over the world. I mean, there's
all over
hundreds of thousands of Christians being murdered in Nigeria and in Central Africa. And everyone's got rights. There isn't a word for anti-Christian, is there? There's Islamophobia and anti-Semitic, but there's no word for being anti-Christian. And there used to be millions of Christians in the Middle East. There's very few left now.
Yeah, Nigeria's horrible, and the media is not even reporting on it. The only place you can find anything about it on social media, and it's really not even rampant on there, in my opinion. It should be ramped up a lot more. And I've posted about it a few times, but I should be posting about it daily, all day long. We all should, just because it is so horrific. But people will cancel their Netflix subscriptions, which I think we all should do that as well. But we make such a big deal about Netflix, and they're, trying to indoctrinate our kids with their transgender ideology. But then when Christians are being persecuted, we don't take it quite so seriously.
Yeah, I actually don't own a television anymore. I got the first ever debate on excess deaths in the world in the UK Parliament, and it took me 9 months of applying every week to get that debate on excess deaths. And it was only when I pointed out to the Speaker of the House of Commons what had happened in 1972 with thalidomide and an 11-year delay between withdrawal of the medicine and the debate, that we don't want history to repeat itself. I got it. And on that debate, I gave a speech about the vaccines and my concerns again. And the BBC put lots of inappropriate tickers running underneath. And they've never done that for anyone's speech in history. And it was saying things like the MMR vaccine is safe for children. I wasn't even talking about the MMR vaccine. And they had 9 they'd obviously pre-prepared. And they said it was about, and they had to, the BBC actually, I made a complaint to Ofcom, and the BBC had to, well, the nearest thing you'd ever get in a letter to an apology from the BBC for doing it. That was the week my TV license was up for renewal, so I decided I'd just get rid of my televisions, and I wasn't going to pay people to censor my speeches in the House of Commons. So I never had a television since then. I gave it up, and I haven't missed it at all. I can just watch what I want on YouTube and surf the net, and it's better without the propaganda. Much better without propaganda.
I agree. If I didn't do what I'm sorry, go ahead, say that again.
Especially when I'm not paying for it, I don't have to pay for it anymore.
Well, you can save a little bit of your, I guess, mental faculties and your pocket money by not subscribing to these things. Andrew, it's been great having you on, man. Our hour is up. Where can people find you? Where can they support you?
I'm on Facebook, Andrew Bridgen, at Bridgen on X, and my website is at abridgen.uk.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I believe you're a true patriot. I know everyone I know supports you and loves you, man. So I thank you for what you're doing for the United Kingdom, and I hope to have you back on anytime. You just let me know. We'll do it again. Well,
we are living in very interesting times, aren't we? What a time to be alive, and we got to hang together.
We do. Brothers across the pond, man.
All the best.
See you soon, brother.
Keep the faith.
You too.
The real beef.